y'all, I'm Emily. I'm an alcoholic. So I'm going to tell you a little bit what it was like, what happened, and what it's like now. It is through a loving and gracious God, strong sponsorship, and the program of Alcoholics Anonymous that I've been sober since March 2nd, 2021. I have a sponsor who sponsors other women, and I sponsor women as well. My home group is Just for Today, which is in Mount Pleasant, South Carolina. And we would love to see y'all there if you're ever in Mount Pleasant. It's at Mondays at 6:30. And all right, I'm going to start. So I like to start and tell a little bit about my childhood, about what happened and how it was. I was raised in I would say, good family. My dad was an alcoholic and my mom was very codependent. And she's also an adult child of an alcoholic. My dad was very abusive growing up, and I always wanted to be like him though. I wanted to be like him because he drank. I wanted to have the happiness, I wanted to have the joy that he had when he wasn't dry, as in when he wasn't drinking. And so I picked up my first drink when I was 10 years old. It was in a special cup, like we like to call it, and from when I was a baby. It was eggnog and rum. And I can remember that feeling of the warmth going down my throat and how beautiful it was to me. You know, I was finally like my dad. I was finally able to drink. You know, I was the 8-year-old sitting in bars and could tell you every single tap on the bar, you know. And so to fast forward a little bit, I'll back up a little bit. My feelings growing up were as follows. I never felt like I could fit in. You know, I was always trying to fit in. I was always a chameleon, trying to be with different groups, trying to fit in. I was with the horseback riding people for a little bit. I was playing soccer for a little bit. I played softball, etc., etc. I was doing all the things all the time, trying to be a perfectionist and overachiever, you know. And so I couldn't figure out what I wanted. And that was the sad part for me. And so I was always a liar and a thief as well. You know, even though I was raised in a good family, I still had a bad side to me. And so I lied to the point that I lied about a suicide attempt in the 6th grade. And it was for attention. And it was for a cry for help because my dad's abuse had gotten so bad with me. And the lying continued, and the feelings of not fitting in continued, and me wanting to drink got more and more ever since I took that drink at 10 years old. You know, the more and more bad things were happening at home, the more and more I wanted to drink. And that's all I could think about all the time. And by the time I was in high school, I had started to sneak my dad's alcohol. And I would take just enough that he didn't notice. You know, I would take one shot and that was it. I started to get in with a group of drug dealers and people who stole alcohol from stores and that type of thing. And I started to drink a little bit. I started to drink more. Horseback riding is a big part of my story. And so I started to drink at the barn a lot. You know, all my friends were older there. They all drank. And so they let me start to drink every once in a while. And I loved that because I finally was able to fit in with a group. You know, that feeling of fitting in finally was happening for me. And I started to drink, and I was happy for once when I started to drink. You know, that my drinking was fun until it wasn't. And when drinking, from the very first drink that I took, once I started, I couldn't stop. And once I stopped, I couldn't stay stopped. And so 9th grade happened, 10th grade happened, and I was drinking a little bit more, still in the same friend group. 11th grade happened, my drinking got progressively worse. I started to hang out with older people, and COVID hit. And so when COVID hit, I fell into drinking on the weekends, every single weekend. I was a binge drinker. And so I would drink hard, I would drink fast until I passed out. And I really enjoyed it for a long time. I really enjoyed the passing out, the blacking out. I did enjoy it. For some reason I did. And so I went on my first bender the summer of 2020. And I was on a family vacation, and my parents didn't know that I was drunk the whole entire time. I was having a great time. I hid it really well. And my whole drinking career, I hid really, really well from my parents. And pretty much everybody. And so I got into my senior year. I was starting to cheat in school. I had been an A+ student until COVID hit, and I started to cheat. And I started to not show up to class. And teachers started to question because they knew it wasn't me. And so my assistant principal pulled me into her office. And she was like, Emily, this isn't you. What's going on? Like, why are you not showing up? Why are you not getting good grades? What's happening? And I told her that I was partying a little bit. She's like, well, you need to slow down then. You need to stop hanging out with those people, and you need to start doing school. And so started to party harder. And I got in with a new friend group and started to drink excessively, almost all of the time. And everybody else drank the same way I did, so I didn't really question it. I just thought we were being high school seniors and, having a good time because COVID was happening and we didn't have to go to class all the time. And I could be hungover showing up to class and nobody would know because my camera was off, my microphone was off, so I didn't have to talk. And I could still lay in bed, but I still wasn't showing up to school, and that friend group that I was hanging out with told me that I needed to slow down and I needed to stop drinking the way I was drinking. So I switched friend groups, because why not? If you're going to tell me that I can't drink the way I want to drink, I'm going to switch friend groups. And so I switched to a really good friend of mine who was much older than I was. And I had worked with her, and her parents were never home. So we always had the house to ourselves. And she was a lightweight, and I wasn't. So she would get drunk really fast, but I could drink as much as I wanted because nobody was home, and our parents supplied us with alcohol. And so being underage still, that was great because I didn't have to search and find and do all the crazy things that happens when I'm obsessively searching for alcohol, and that's part of my story is that for the longest time, I always was asking people where I could get alcohol, who I can get alcohol from, who can go to the store and buy it for me, who can, I will do whatever it takes to get alcohol, whatever it takes, because that's what I needed, and, so I started to also smoke marijuana with this friend, and that became part of my story now, and alcohol was still the first thing that I went to, but other substances were used when I started to drink to produce another effect. It was all about the effect that alcohol gave me and other substances, and it was all about that feeling that numbed all of the pain. It took away the pain. It took away all of the bad feelings that I had. It made me a new person, somebody who I wanted to be, and somebody who fit in, somebody who was happy, somebody who didn't have to lie about how she was feeling, and all that was a facade because I was being a two-sided person. The big book talks about being a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. And I was, because I was a completely different person when I was drinking. You know, I was miserable when I wasn't drinking, but then I was this happy, outgoing person when I was. And I started to lose my morals drinking. You know, I started to do things that I never thought I would do just to get alcohol. I started to do, I'm not even gonna go into it because I just can't. But I had a few times with friends, for example, one of the times I drank so much the night before that I was the next morning. And I drove 2 friends drunk 2 hours away. And the hangover hit me at 3 o'clock that day, and I had realized how much I had messed up. And that guilt, that feeling of guilt killed me. I didn't know what to do. And I had a few cases like that. And the next morning, I always had to look back through my camera roll, see what stupid stuff I had done, look through text messages and see who I had texted and what I had said and who I needed to say I'm sorry to because of all the stupid stuff that I said, you know, and all of this is just a part of the journey. You know, I don't regret any of it because it's all something that I can learn from today. And so to fast forward a little bit, I started to drink more and more. That friend who I was hanging out with was sleeping with guys, and I would get the alcohol while she was sleeping with the guys. So we did that pretty much Thursday through Monday every week, and I was able to drink the way that I wanted to drink, and I was getting more and more miserable the days that I was not drinking because I didn't have alcohol. And I didn't have something to fill the hole that I wanted to fill. You know, that God-sized hole that you'll hear talked about was not being filled. And I couldn't figure out why. Because alcohol had done it for a while. But then it stopped. And the fun stopped. And I got miserable and depressed. And mental health is also part of my story. So my mental health got 20 times worse while I was drinking. And I was seeing a therapist at this time, and I was talking to her about all of the drinking that I was doing. And so she suggested that I go to AA. And so I was like, you know what? I'm so miserable to the point that I'm willing to, at any length, to not feel the way that I'm feeling right now. So I went to AA. My first meeting was a young people's meeting on Zoom. And I turned my camera off, and I turned my microphone off, and I just sat there and listened. I cannot tell you a word that was said. I cannot tell you I can't tell you anything about that meeting because I wasn't present. I didn't want to be present, you know? I wanted to still be out drinking and that type of stuff. But somebody after the meeting, of course, asked if I had a sponsor. They were like, Emily, stay on for a second. And then asked if I had a sponsor. I said no, and she was like, okay, well, I have this woman who is looking for sponsees, and meet her tomorrow at a meeting. And so I showed up, you know, I was still miserable, wanted something different, so I showed up. And I was handed a sponsor. That's not necessarily how I would choose a sponsor today, but I was handed a sponsor, and I think that's God's way of what I needed at the moment, you know? And so this sponsor, she was 23 years old. I should say, I was 17 when I got sober. And so I needed somebody young when I came into the program to have as a sponsor. And so she was 23 years old. She got sober when she was 19. And she started to take me through the steps. We had a long conversation that night, the first night that I met her. Still can't tell you a word that was said because I was such in a fog, you know. And so he started to take me through the steps, and I was not being honest. You know, my first step, yeah, sure, I'm powerless over alcohol. Sure, my life is unmanageable. You know, I didn't want to admit it. And I didn't want to come into acceptance with that either. Mm-hmm. And my second step, I used my childhood higher power growing up, and that just didn't work for me anymore. But I was easy to go to, and so that's what I did. And my third step, totally BS'd that. You know, all of the first 3 steps I BS'd, and I didn't have a connection with a higher power. And so when I got to my 4th step, I didn't have this connection with a higher power, so I didn't know what I was doing. You know what I mean? I didn't know how to be rigorously honest on a 4th step and write my whole entire life out on a 4th step and be willing to share my life with somebody else and God. And so I wrote a 4th step, and I wasn't as honest as I could be. And I was still miserable after my 3rd step, and I couldn't figure out why. Because everybody had talked about this relief and all the things, and that I was going to have a weight lifted off my shoulders, and that just didn't happen for me. So I was kind of angry. You know, I didn't understand why that didn't happen for me. And so I sat on my steps 6 and 7 for a while, and I got so miserable, y'all. So miserable. I didn't have a connection with a higher power. I wasn't being honest with the sponsor. I wasn't really showing up to meetings. I still wasn't showing up to school. And I just was absolutely miserable. And I ended up being so miserable, I was suicidal. I ended up in this psych ward at 17 years old. And I turned 18 in the psych ward. And so what that looked like was me being 17 on a Tuesday, turning 18 at midnight, and then walking me over to the adult side at midnight. Mm-hmm. And so I blew out a lighter for my 18th birthday. And, you know, I'll tell you a quick funny story. And this is something that I do not recommend if you ever go to the psych ward. I ended up getting in a relationship in the psych ward. And this girl, I gave her my phone number. And she called me when I was about 2 months out of Pavillon. And she told me some news and basically was like, oh, well, I'll move down to Asheville with you. Like, I'll move down. This life can be ours right now. And you can have this beautiful life with me and blah, 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 blah. I love you. And said, I was like, I can't talk right now. Goodbye. I didn't block her. 2 months later, she called me again. Same story. She said, I love you. And I blocked her finally. So that's something I do not recommend. At all. All right, so I was in the psych ward, did some crazy stuff in the psych ward, kissed a guy, got in a relationship, did some wild stuff. Do not recommend any of it because that's an absolute insanity of our disease. You know what I mean? Searching for something to fill that hole of not feeling good. You know, and I wanted to feel good, so I was searching for something to fill me up. And so I went door to door from the psych ward to Pavillon. And while I was here, I was still in a fog. You know, I tried to suck in as much information as I could, but it was hard. I'm not even gonna lie about that. It was hard to suck in information because of how much of a fog I was in. But you know what I did? I kept showing up, I kept doing the work, and I kept being honest with people about how I was feeling. And that was the main things for me, was that I had to be honest this time. And because of those things, I got results this time. You know, I was able to get through a 4-step while I was here, which was pretty incredible. It still didn't give me the total relief that I was looking for because I still was not as honest as I could be. but it still gave me some relief, which is what I had been looking for. And so I did my 4-step and 5th step here. I did my 6 and 7 here, and then I got out. And my choice was either to go home back to my abusive father and my mother, or to go to sober living. And so I chose to go to sober living. And sober living was a very nice way to introduce me back into the real world, because I was able to be in a safe place with other sober people, but go about a regular life. And I got a job, had my car, had a curfew, was also in a PhD program, which was great. Had some heavy therapy while I was there, which was also great. And I ended up, I got a sponsor while I was there, but again, went back to the not being honest part. I was going to meetings, I was showing up, which is 85% of the work. And I will say that again, because it's so important. 85% is just the showing up part, and I was able to hold on, thank God for that, because I kept showing up no matter what. And I wasn't doing the work, so I was still miserable, but I wasn't as miserable as before, because I was at least showing up. And so I got a sponsor. We went through the first 3 steps. It took me 6 months to go through the first 3 steps. And after that, I moved home, back home to Virginia. And while I was in Virginia, I got a new sponsor and went through the first 3 steps, still wasn't honest. Got to my 4th step. I had 2 weeks to do my 4th step. Wrote 3 things on it, and I got fired by that sponsor because I was not honest and did not have a 4th step right. And so I got a new sponsor. And all while this is happening, there's still chaos going on at home, and I thrive in chaos. And so the chaos that was happening was lighting a fire under my butt and was making me not want to do anything. When I'm engulfed in chaos, I'm able to, I'm trying to look for the words. When I'm engulfed in chaos, I focus on that rather than focusing on other things. Mm-hmm. And so I was really focused and I was sucking people in, y'all. I was sucking people in to the drama of my life, into the, please feel bad for me. Please, my life is so bad, even though my life really was not that bad. And so I got another sponsor, and I was not honest with her at all. I still didn't want to be honest. I still was miserable, but I wasn't miserable enough to go to any length to get sober still. I didn't pick up a drink through this whole entire time, but I still was miserable. And so I started to look at colleges because I had taken a gap year to get sober. I had had a full ride to James Madison University, but I ended up skipping out on an opportunity to come to Pavillon. And so I took a gap year to get sober. And so it was finally time for me to start looking at colleges again. And I chose College of Charleston because they have a collegiate recovery program. And that is a sober space for college kids to go if they're sober, which is a huge part of my recovery today. We're all sober, we're all in AA, and we have meetings every single day at lunchtime, and we all are friends, we're all family. Because it's nice to have somebody else who's young and in college to understand what it's like to go through every living day around drinking, surrounded by drinking. And so I chose College of Charleston for that reason. And I started to come to Charleston like 3 months early to start to get ingrained in the program, because I did know that I needed to do that. You know what I mean? I needed to start to go to meetings, to meet some people. I needed to have some accountability to a certain point. And so I started to go to meetings, and in May of 2022, I found my sponsor in Charleston. And I chose her off of, she gave somebody a chip at a meeting. And I liked what she said, I liked the energy that she had, and I liked what she gave off. And so I chose her to be my sponsor. And so that's, if I were to suggest anything during this talk, and if you can hear anything during this talk, if you hear something that you want to have in somebody, ask them to be your sponsor. Because it's an easy way to do it. You know, sponsorship is not permanent, it's super temporary, and it doesn't have to be something that you're glued at the hip with somebody. So I chose her to be my sponsor, and I started to go down to Charleston a few months early because I knew once I got down there, I wasn't going to want to go to meetings. I was going to want to get involved in college life. I was going to get miserable again, and I wasn't going to want to do this stuff, you know? And so I finally got down to Charleston. I made the smart decision to live on Fraternity Row. I was miserable for a long time because I made that choice, you know, but I got the relief from AA that I had finally been looking for because I finally did a thorough first step, second step, third step, fourth step, and fifth step. My fifth step looked like me laying my entire life out to somebody. You know what I mean? Putting it on pen to paper and putting out the worst stuff that I had never told anybody. It was scary, and I didn't want to do it, but I was finally miserable enough that I was willing to go to any length to get that relief. And so I want to read the fifth step promises to y'all because they're my favorite promises, and they're pretty incredible. It's from page 75 of the big book. We pocket our pride and go to it, illuminating every twist of character, every dark cranny of the past. Once we have taken this step, withholding nothing, we are delighted. We can look the world in the eye. We can be alone at perfect peace and ease. Our fears fall from us. We begin to feel the nearness of our Creator. We may have had certain spiritual beliefs, but now we begin to have a spiritual experience. The feeling that the drink problem has disappeared will often come strongly. We feel we are on the broad highway walking hand in hand with the spirit of the universe. And I am able to sit with myself today and be quiet and not have crazy thoughts, crazy things happen, you know, at least drinking wise. I have some mental health problems, so some crazy thoughts kind of happen sometimes. We all it out. But I'm able to do all of this has come true for me. And so my sixth and seventh step look like I have this behavior pattern that happens on my fifth step. I'm able to find a behavior pattern. So my sixth step looks like doing a word study, as in I take words from that behavior pattern and do synonyms and antonyms. The synonyms are what I don't want to be, and the antonyms are what I want to put on my ideal and what I want to strive to be. And so that looks like, for example, dishonesty. Synonyms.
Honesty.
No, synonyms.
Hired. Okay.
My antonyms, honesty. And so I want to strive to be honest. And so that goes on my ideal. And my ideal now looks like I am valuable. I am loved. You know, I want to be, or I am at perfect peace and ease. I can look people in the eye. All of those things. And so to move on to my eighth step looks like making a list of all of the people that I had harmed. And it looks like writing out on index cards those people's names and then what I had done to harm them, and then the actual amends on the back, which is my ninth step. And for me, I had 81 pages of resentments on my fifth step. And so I had a lot of people to make amends to. And amends can look like a living amends, or they can look like an in-person amends, or they can look like not making amends at all, because sometimes making amends can hurt some other people as well. And so my sponsor had me categorize it. Right now, maybe later, F no. You know what I mean? Because I might not want to do those people yet. And so she had me pray on those people that were on the F no list. Because eventually I needed to become willing to pray and to become willing to give them amends. And I needed to give them amends. And so my 10th step looks like kind of what y'all do every single day. But it also looks like reading On Awakening in the big book every single morning. And it looks like, and I'll read some pages, I'll read something from that really quick. On Awakening, let us think about the 24 hours ahead. We consider our plans for the day. Before we begin, we ask God to direct our thinking, especially asking you that it be divorced from self-pity, dishonest, or self-seeking motives. And so it goes from there. And it talks about we be shown all throughout the day what our next step is supposed to be, that we be given whatever we need to take care of such problems. We ask especially for freedom from self-will and are careful to make no requests for ourselves only. And so that's what I do for my 10th step. My 11th step looks like getting on my knees every single morning and praying the 3rd and 7th step prayer. It looks like showing up to meetings. It looks like calling my sponsor. It looks like calling 3 other women in the program every single day, you know? And my 12th step is incredible. You know what I mean? It is incredible to watch somebody go from being absolutely hopeless to somebody that is bright and full of life, and I'm able to give that back to somebody. You know what I mean? Something that was freely given to me, I'm now able to give freely back to them. And 12-step work doesn't always have to be having sponsees. It doesn't always have to be what you think of normal 12-step carrying the message. It can look like just doing service work, which can look like picking up chairs after the meeting. It can look like making coffee before the meeting or help cleaning up after the meeting. It can look like sitting on a board, like I'm not going to get into boards and district and TCIO and all of that, but it can look like helping out with workshops. And it can look like a lot of different things. And it can look like just calling somebody and asking how their day is going. Because that gets you out of your head. It gets me out of my head. You know, to ask somebody what I can do to help them throughout the day gets me out of my head. You know, and I want to talk a little bit about what my sponsor has me do every day before I have to end. You know, my sponsor has 5 requirements of me every single day. That is to go to meetings, call her, call 3 other alcoholic women, pray, do step work, and go to do service work. And when I do those 5 things, I'm spiritually fit. And when I'm spiritually fit, I can walk through the dark. I can walk through the light. I can walk through the dark. I can walk through some really hard things. And like, I'll say this quickly. In March, I had an experience, and if I were not in the middle of the program, it wouldn't have happened. I was suicidal, and so I ended back up in the psych ward, and then I ended up in a mental health facility for a month and a half. And if I were not in a safe environment, if I were not surrounded by the women of Alcoholics Anonymous, if I were not part of the service that I am part of, I would not be here today. I wouldn't be. And I keep showing up. I keep doing the things. I keep showing up, and I keep spreading the message, because that's all we can do. You know, that was what was done for me, and that's what I try to give back. You know, because it's the most incredible thing. And it's incredible to watch people's eyes come back and life come back. And I've seen some crazy things happen in sobriety, but they're all incredible. And God has this beautiful plan for all of us. In my opinion, God has this beautiful plan for all of us. And I now get to walk hand in hand with him and all of the women and men in Alcoholics Anonymous and walk through some really tough stuff. But I'm okay today. You know, I'm happy and I'm joyous and I'm free. So, thank you.